When a runaway golden retriever limps into Tessa's life, she doesn't expect his polished, powerful owner to follow, and certainly not to threaten the future of her family farm. But Boone has a way of bringing people together, or tearing them apart. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The early morning sun filtered through the weathered barn windows at Willow Bend Farm. Tessa Granger wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of dirt across her forehead. At 35, her life was a routine of endless chores, early mornings, and the constant worry about keeping the farm afloat since her father's passing. "Come on, girls," she called to her goats as she filled their feed buckets. "Breakfast time." The lavender fields needed weeding. The fence in the north pasture had a broken post, and the roof over the porch was still leaking. Tessa pulled the crumpled to-do list from her pocket, written on the back of a grocery receipt, and sighed. Her father would have fixed these things in a heartbeat, but now it was all on her shoulders. The sudden sound of whimpering stopped her in her tracks. Tessa turned, scanning the barn until she spotted movement in the corner. A golden retriever, muddy and shivering, had somehow found its way inside. The poor thing was limping, holding up its front paw. "Hey there," she said softly, approaching, slowly. "Where did you come from, boy?" The dog's eyes were gentle but wary. His golden coat was matted with mud and burrs, and he was soaking wet from the overnight rain. "It's okay. I won't hurt you," Tessa assured him, carefully reaching out her hand. The dog sniffed it cautiously before giving it a gentle lick. Tessa's heart melted instantly. "You're hurt, aren't you? Let me help." She led the dog to the house, wrapped his injured paw, and heated up some chicken broth. The dog lapped it up eagerly. "No collar," Tessa mumbled, checking the dog's neck. "Someone must be missing you." After the dog had eaten, Tessa made a comfortable bed in the hayloft with an old blanket. "You rest now. Tomorrow we'll figure out where you belong." That night, Tessa checked on the dog twice, bringing him more water, and even sneaking him some leftover meatloaf. She whispered to him in the darkness of the barn, "Don't worry, boy, you're safe now." The next morning arrived with a knock at her door that was so loud and insistent it startled Tessa from her coffee. She wasn't used to visitors, especially not at 7:30 in the morning. "Coming," she called, wiping her hands on her jeans. When she opened the door, she nearly took a step back in surprise. Standing on her porch was a man who looked completely out of place at Willow Bend Farm. He was tall, handsome in a polished way, with dark hair perfectly styled despite the light drizzle that was falling. His tailored coat probably cost more than her monthly mortgage payment, and his leather boots, which had barely a speck of mud on them despite the muddy driveway, looked expensive enough to fund her farm repairs. "Kattansi, I help you?" Tessa asked, immediately feeling underdressed in her worn flannel shirt and work jeans. "I'm looking for my dog," the man said. His voice was deep and smooth, the kind that sounded like it was used to giving orders and having them obeyed. "A golden retriever. Someone in town said they saw him heading this way yesterday." Tessa crossed her arms. "And who might you be?" The man looked momentarily taken aback, as if he wasn't used to being questioned. Then his expression softened into a charming smile. "I'm sorry, Rhett Langston." He extended his hand. "And my dog's name is Boone." Tessa felt her stomach drop. Rhett Langston. Everyone in the county knew that name. The Langstons owned half the land in the state, their cattle empire stretching across thousands of acres. They were agricultural royalty, and Rhett was the current heir to it all. She'd seen his face on the cover of Modern Rancher magazine at the feed store just last month. "The reluctant king of cattle," the headline had proclaimed. "Tessa Granger," she said, shaking his hand briefly. "And yes, your dog is here. He showed up in my barn yesterday morning, injured and hungry." Relief flooded Rhett's face. "Boone's hurt? Is he okay?" "He's fine. I wrapped his paw and fed him. He's resting in the barn." "Thank you," Rhett said, and the genuine gratitude in his voice surprised her. "He got spooked during the storm 2 nights ago and ran off. I've been looking everywhere." Tessa led him to the barn, where Boone was lounging on the blanket she'd provided. The moment the dog saw Rhett, he jumped up, barking excitedly and wagging his tail. "Hey, buddy!" Rhett knelt down, getting his expensive pants dirty without a second thought as he hugged the dog. "You had me worried sick." Tessa watched the reunion with mixed feelings. The man clearly loved his dog, but something still bothered her. Why was he out in the storm alone, she asked directly. Rhett looked up, his smile fading. We were at my lake house. The thunder scared him, and he bolted through the screen door. Before I could catch him, I've been searching non-stop. Tessa nodded, but her expression remained skeptical. Well, he's been well behaved. I changed his bandage this morning, and the cut doesn't look too deep. Keep it clean for a few days and he should be fine. I can't thank you enough, Rhett said, standing up. He reached for his wallet. Please, let me compensate you for your trouble. Tessa's eyes narrowed. Put your money away, Mr. Langston. I didn't help him for a reward. Rhett looked startled again, as if he wasn't used to having his offers refused. I didn't mean to offend you. I just wanted to show my appreciation. The best way to show appreciation is to take better care of your dog, Tessa replied. Then, immediately regretted her sharp tone. I'm sorry, that wasn't fair. He clearly loves you. Rhett studied her for a moment, taking in her practical braid, her rolled-up sleeves, and the determined set of her jaw. She wasn't what he expected, not like the women who usually surrounded him at the country club or business events. Not many people talk to me that way, Ms. Granger, he said finally. Then maybe more people should, Tessa responded, holding his gaze. A slow smile spread across Rhett's face. Maybe they should. He clipped a leash onto Boone's collar. Thank you again. I mean it. Tessa walked them to the door. Take care, Boone, she said, bending down to pet the dog one last time. Stay out of trouble. Willowbend Farm, Rhett said, looking around at her modest property. I don't think I've been out this way before. No reason you would have been, Tessa replied. We're just a small lavender farm with a few goats, nothing like the Langston spread. Sometimes small is better, Rhett said. Less complicated. Tessa almost laughed at that. Running this farm alone was anything but uncomplicated. Goodbye, Mr. Langston. Goodbye, Ms. Granger. And thank you for saving my dog. Tessa watched as Rhett and Boone climbed into a shiny black pickup truck that cost more than she'd make in 3 years. As they drove away, she told herself that was the end of it. Their worlds couldn't be more different. She'd never see Rhett Langston again. She was wrong. 3 days later, Tessa was fixing the fence in the north pasture when she heard barking. She turned to see Boone racing across her field, tail wagging frantically, with Rhett jogging behind him. Boone, stop, Rhett called, but the dog ignored him, running straight to Tessa and circling her excitedly. What in the world? Tessa said, kneeling to pet the enthusiastic dog. Rhett reached them, slightly out of breath. I'm sorry, we were driving past and he started going crazy. Before I knew it, he'd jumped out the window at the stop sign. Missed me, did you? Tessa asked Boone, who licked her face in response. Apparently, Rhett said. He was dressed more casually today, jeans and a button-down shirt, though they still looked expensive. Or maybe he just likes your cooking better than mine. Tessa couldn't help but smile. I doubt that unless you're a terrible cook. The worst, Rhett admitted. My staff would vouch for that. Of course he had staff. Tessa adjusted her work gloves. Well, I should get back to this fence. Rhett looked at the broken post she was working on. Need a hand? Tessa raised an eyebrow. In those clothes, I don't think so. I'm not as useless as I look, he said, rolling up his sleeves. And I owe you for helping Boone. Before Tessa could protest further, Rhett had picked up the post hole digger and was examining her work. You've got the depth right, but you'll want to make it a bit wider for stability. I know how to set a fence post, Tessa said defensively. I'm sure you do, Rhett replied, but 4 hands are better than 2. Against her better judgment, Tessa let him help. To her surprise, he knew what he was doing. His hands were strong and capable, not soft like she'd expected. They worked side by side for nearly an hour, with Boone happily exploring the pasture. So, Rhett said as they tamped down the soil around the new post, lavender and goats. Interesting combination. The lavender brings in money from the organic markets and craft fairs. The goats provide milk for specialty cheeses, Tessa explained. My father started it all. I'm just trying to keep it going. Your father has passed? Rhett asked gently. Tessa nodded, surprised at the lump that formed in her throat. 2 years ago. Heart attack. I'm sorry, Rhett said, and he sounded like he meant it. My father died last year. It's not easy. Their eyes met, and Tessa saw genuine understanding there. For a moment, they were just two people who had lost something important, standing in a field with the sun beating down on them. The moment was broken when Boone barked, chasing after a squirrel. "I should go," Rhett said, brushing the dirt from his hands. "Thank you for letting me help." "Thank you for the assistance," Tessa replied, meaning it. As Rhett called Boone and headed back to his truck, Tessa found herself watching them go with unexpected disappointment. She told herself it was because she'd missed the dog. But later that night, as she sipped tea on her porch and looked out at the stars, she admitted to herself that she was curious about Rhett Langston. The man from the magazine cover didn't match. The man who had dug fence posts with her today. Little did she know, as Rhett drove home with Boone asleep in the passenger seat, he was thinking the same thing about her and wondering how soon he could find another excuse to visit Willowbend. Not a week passed without any sign of Rhett or Boone, and Tessa told herself it was for the best. She had too much work to do to be distracted by a man who lived in a different world. The lavender needed harvesting, and she had orders for goat cheese to fill for the weekend farmers' market. "Focus, Tessa," she muttered to herself as she clipped lavender stems and placed them in her basket. But her mind kept wandering to Rhett's smile and the way he'd worked beside her fixing the fence. The sound of tires on gravel made her look up. To her surprise, Rhett's black truck was pulling into her driveway. Boone was hanging his head out the passenger window, tail wagging visibly even from a distance. Tessa straightened, brushing lavender bits from her jeans as Rhett parked and let Boone out. The dog immediately raced toward her, circling her excitedly. "Hey boy," she laughed, petting him. "What are you doing back here?" Rhett approached more slowly, carrying 2 coffee cups. "I was in the area," he said. "Thought I'd bring you coffee as a thank you for the fence help." Tessa raised an eyebrow. "You were in the area? Your ranch is on the other side of the county." Rhett had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Okay, I wasn't in the area. But Boone's been whining to come back here, and I thought coffee was a good excuse." Tessa accepted the cup he offered. "Thanks, I could use the caffeine." "Cream and sugar?" he asked. "I wasn't sure how you take it." "Black is fine," she said, taking a sip. It was good, much better than the cheap stuff she bought at the grocery store. Rhett looked around at her lavender field. "Beautiful place you have here." "It's nothing compared to Langston Ranch," Tessa said, thinking of the massive cattle operation his family ran. "That's different," Rhett replied. "This feels like a home. The ranch is more like a business." Tessa studied him as he looked out over her modest farm. Today he was wearing jeans, boots, and a simple button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, more casual than before, but still clearly expensive. "So what brings the heir to the Langston Empire out to my little farm, really?" she asked bluntly. Rhett turned to her, his expression serious. "Honestly, you." Tessa nearly choked on her coffee. "Me? You're different," he said simply. "Most people I meet either want something from me or are intimidated by my family name. You're neither." "Should I be intimidated?" Tessa challenged. Rhett smiled. "No, I'm just a guy with a runaway dog and terrible fence-building skills." Tessa couldn't help but laugh. "Your fence skills weren't that bad." "High praise," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Speaking of which, any other repairs I can help with? I have a free day." Tessa hesitated. She did have a long list of chores, and an extra pair of hands would help. But accepting felt like opening a door she wasn't sure she wanted to open. "The porch roof is leaking," she admitted finally. "I've been putting it off." "Show me," Rhett said, following her toward the house. They spent the morning working on the roof. Rhett surprised her by knowing exactly what to do, climbing up with confidence and showing her where the problem was. By lunchtime they had it fixed, and Tessa invited him in for sandwiches. "So," she said as they ate at her kitchen table, "how does the king of cattle know so much about fixing roofs?" Rhett winced at the title. "That magazine article was my PR team's idea, not mine. And I know about roofs because I used to work summers with our ranch foreman when I was younger. My father insisted I learn the business from the ground up." "Smart man, your father," Tessa said. Rhett's expression clouded. "He was. Tough, but smart." He looked around her kitchen with its worn countertops and outdated appliances. Did you always want to take over your family farm? Tessa thought about. No, actually. I went to college for business, worked in Chicago for a while at a marketing firm. But when Dad got sick, I came home to help. After he died, she shrugged. This place was all we had. I couldn't bear to sell it. Do you miss the city? Rhett asked. Sometimes, Tessa admitted. But there's something real about this life, hard but real. Rhett nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's what I've been looking for. After lunch, Tessa showed him the rest. Of the farm, the goat pen, the small cheese-making setup in the converted garage, the lavender drying in the old greenhouse. Rhett listened attentively, asking intelligent questions that showed genuine interest. You've built something special here, he said, as they walked back to his truck in the late afternoon, Boone running circles around them. Tessa shrugged. It's simple, but it's mine. Simple is underrated, Rhett said. He hesitated, then added, Would you have dinner with me sometime? Not here, somewhere nice. Tessa's heart skipped. I don't really fit in at nice places anymore. Then we'll find. Somewhere not nice, Rhett said with a smile. I just want to spend more time with you. The sincerity in his voice made Tessa's carefully built walls start to crumble. Okay, but I choose the place. Deal, Rhett agreed, his smile widening. They exchanged phone numbers, and Rhett promised to call the next day. As his truck disappeared, down the driveway, Tessa hugged herself, wondering what she was getting into. The next evening, Tessa took Rhett to Joe's Diner, a local spot known for its homemade pies and no-frills atmosphere. She half expected him to be disappointed, but Rhett seemed completely at ease, chatting with the waitress and ordering the daily special without even looking at the price. So, Tessa said after they'd ordered, Tell me about running a cattle empire. Rhett's smile faltered slightly. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. Lots of paperwork, meetings, decisions that affect thousands of people's livelihoods. Some days I feel like I'm drowning in it all. Is that what the article meant by reluctant? Rhett sighed. That's what my father called me. Said I never seemed to embrace the role he'd created for me. He took a sip of his water. Truth is, I love the ranch and our people. It's the corporate side I struggle with. What would you rather be doing? Tessa asked. Rhett looked surprised, as if no one had ever asked him that question before. Honestly, I'd like to focus on sustainable ranching practices, smaller scale, higher quality, but the board and my father's legacy push for bigger, more profitable. Their food arrived, interrupting the conversation. Tessa watched as Rhett dug into his meatloaf with obvious enjoyment, not what she'd expected from a man who probably ate at five-star restaurants regularly. This is fantastic, he said, closing his eyes for a moment to savor the taste. Best meatloaf I've had in years. Tessa smiled. Wait till you try the pie. Throughout dinner, Tessa found herself relaxing more and more. Rhett was easy to talk, too funny, and seemed genuinely interested in her opinions. They debated farming techniques, shared stories about difficult customers, and discovered a mutual love for old Western movies. When they finished their pie, cherry for him, apple for her, Rhett reached across the table and took her hand. Thank you for tonight, he said. It's been a long time since I've just been myself with someone. Tessa felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the coffee she was drinking. It's been nice, she admitted. As they left the diner, Rhett walked her to her truck. The night was cool, with stars spread across the clear sky. I'd like to see you again, Rhett said, standing close enough that Tessa could smell his cologne. I'd like that too, she replied, surprising herself with her honesty. Rhett smiled, then leaned down and kissed her cheek softly. Good night, Tessa. Good night. Rhett, she whispered, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. Over the next few weeks, Rhett became a regular visitor at Willowbend Farm. He brought coffee, helped with chores, and always brought Boone, who seemed as happy as his owner, to spend time with Tessa. One Saturday, Rhett arrived with a picnic basket. I thought we could have lunch by the stream, he suggested. Tessa had been planning to work on her lavender products, but the hopeful look in Rhett's eyes made her set aside her to-do list. That sounds perfect. They sat on a blanket near the small stream that ran through the back of Tessa's property. Rhett had brought an impressive spread: cheese, fruit, fresh bread, and even a bottle of wine. Did your chef prepare this? Tessa teased. Rhett looked offended. I'll have you know I made this myself, well, except the bread and the cheese, and I had help cutting the fruit, Tessa laughed. So you opened the wine bottle yourself? Actually, my housekeeper did that, Rhett admitted with a grin, but I supervised. As they ate, Tessa found herself studying Rhett's face. The lines around his eyes when he smiled, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he leaned forward. What? He asked, catching her staring. Just trying to figure you out. Tessa said honestly, the man I see here doesn't match the businessman I've read about. Rhett's expression grew serious. Maybe because the businessman is the role I play, not who I am. He hesitated, then added, my father groomed me from birth to take over Langston Enterprises. I never had a choice. We all have choices, Tessa said gently. Some are harder than others, Rhett replied. The company employs thousands of people. I can't just walk away because I'd rather be herding cattle than sitting in board meetings. Tessa nodded, understanding the weight of that responsibility. What was he like, your father? Rhett looked out at the stream, his expression distant. Powerful, determined. He built the company from one ranch to what it is today. Nothing stood in his way. He paused. He wasn't an easy man to please. And your mother? Died when I was 12. After that, it was just me, my father, and the ranch. Rhett turned to look at her. What about you? Tell me about your parents. Tessa smiled, remembering. Mom was a teacher, Dad was a dreamer. He was always trying new things, the lavender, the goats, organic methods before they were trendy. Mom kept him grounded. They loved each other fiercely. Her smile faded. After Mom died of cancer 5 years ago, something in Dad changed. He seemed to lose his drive. I'm sorry, Rhett said, reaching for her hand. Life happens, Tessa said, squeezing his fingers. We adapt. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Boone chase butterflies near the water. When Rhett finally spoke again, his voice was soft. I haven't felt this peaceful in years, he admitted. Being here with you, it feels right. Tessa's heart raced as he leaned toward her. When their lips met, it felt as natural as breathing. His kiss was gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. When they pulled apart, Tessa felt slightly dazed. I've been wanting to do that since the day we fixed the fence, Rhett whispered. What took you so long? Tessa asked with a smile, as he... The sun began to set, casting golden light over the farm. Tessa realized she was falling for Rhett Langston, the man, not the millionaire rancher. And the thought both thrilled and terrified her. What she didn't know was that while they'd been enjoying their peaceful afternoon, Rhett's phone, silenced and forgotten in his jacket pocket, had been buzzing with urgent messages from his office. Messages about a major land acquisition near Willowbend. Messages that would soon threaten everything growing between them. The morning sun streamed through Tessa's kitchen window as she hummed to herself, preparing her display for the farmer's market. Her lavender goat cheese had been selling out every weekend, and she had finally saved enough to replace the aging refrigerator in her cheese-making area. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Rhett. Meeting running late, can't make lunch. Dinner instead. I'll cook. Tessa smiled. They had been seeing each other for nearly a month now, and Rhett had become a fixture in her life. She texted back a quick yes before returning to her work. At the farmer's market that afternoon, Tessa was arranging her lavender bundles when she overheard a conversation from the next booth over. Did you hear about the new development coming? To the old Wilson property? Martha, who sold honey, was saying to another vendor. Some big luxury ranch resort. The Langston Company bought it. Tessa froze. The Wilson property bordered her farm to the west. Yeah, replied the other vendor. Going to be real fancy, I heard. Condos, spa, the works. Calling it the authentic ranch experience or something like that. For rich city folks who want to play cowboy on weekends. Tessa's stomach clenched. She moved closer, pretending to adjust her display. When did this happen? She asked casually. Martha looked over. Oh, Tessa. Contract was signed last week, I think. My cousin works at the county clerk's office. They're planning to break ground next month. Tessa nodded, her mind racing. Last week, while Rhett was bringing her coffee and kissing her by the stream, he hadn't said a word about his company buying the neighboring property. You okay, dear? Martha asked. You look pale. Fine, Tessa managed. Just tired. The rest of the market passed in a blur. Tessa sold her products on autopilot, her thoughts tumbling over each other. A luxury resort would change everything. Increased traffic, noise, water usage that could affect her well. And if they expanded later, her small farm would be the obvious next purchase. By the time she arrived home, her shock had turned to anger. She was unloading her truck when Rhett's black pickup pulled into the driveway. Boone jumped out first, racing to greet her as usual. But Tessa barely acknowledged the dog. Rhett approached with a smile, holding a grocery bag. I thought I'd make us pasta. I can't promise it'll be edible, but... He stopped when he saw her, expression. What's wrong? When were you going to tell me? Tessa asked, her voice cold. Rhett looked confused. Tell you what? About the Wilson property. About your company building a resort right next to my farm. Rhett's face went blank with surprise, then understanding dawned. Tessa, I can explain... Explain what? That while you were here, helping me fix my roof and kissing me by the stream, your company was planning to build something that could destroy everything I've worked for? That's not... Martha said the contract was signed last week. Tessa's voice shook. Were you ever going to mention it? Rhett set down the grocery bag and ran a hand through his hair. I just found out yesterday. I was in meetings all day today about it. That's why I had to cancel lunch. But you knew your company was looking at properties in this area, didn't you? Rhett hesitated. Yes, but I didn't know which ones. The acquisitions team handles that. And you're just the CEO, so why would they tell you? Tessa's sarcasm was sharp. I'm not the CEO, Rhett corrected. My father was. I'm the president, but there's a board of directors and other executives who make decisions too. Tessa crossed her arms. And you're saying you had no idea this was happening? Rhett sighed. I knew we were expanding the resort division. I didn't know they'd chosen a property next to yours. He stepped toward her. Tessa, I would have told you if I'd known. Would you? She challenged. Or would you have kept quiet, hoping I wouldn't find out until it was too late to do anything about it? Hurt flashed across Rhett's face. Is that who you think I am? I don't know who you are, Tessa replied. The man who helps me with farm chores or the business tycoon whose company is going to put a resort filled with rich tourists right next to my farm. They're both me, Tessa. I can't separate those parts of my life. Convenient, she said bitterly. Well, Mr. Langston, I think you should leave now. Take your dog and your pasta and go back to your mansion. Tessa, please. Rhett's voice softened. Let's talk about this. There might be a way to make it work for both of us. Both of us? Tessa's laugh was harsh. Your company is worth millions. My farm is all I have. There's no both of us here. Rhett looked at her for a long moment, his expression pained. I care about you, Tessa. More than I expected to. Please don't shut me out. For a moment, Tessa wavered. The sincerity in his eyes made her want to believe him. But then she thought of her father, of his dreams for this land, of all she'd sacrificed to keep it going. Goodbye, Rhett, she said, turning away so he wouldn't see the tears threatening to spill. She heard him call Boone, heard the truck door open and close, heard the engine start. When she finally looked back, the driveway was empty, and she was alone again. That night, Tessa couldn't sleep. She paced her small house, going over every conversation she'd had with Rhett. Had there been signs she missed? Was he just using her to get information about her farm? Her phone buzzed several times with messages from him, but she didn't read them. What could he possibly say that would change anything? The next morning, Tessa was out in the lavender field early, aggressively pulling weeds as if she could uproot her feelings along with them. The sound of tires on gravel made her look up, expecting to see Rhett's truck, but instead, a sleek silver car was coming up her driveway. A woman stepped out, tall, impeccably dressed in a business suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked around with an expression of distaste before spotting Tessa. "Miss Granger," she called, picking her way carefully through the field in her high heels. "Yes?" Tessa straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. "I'm Victoria Pierce, executive, vice president at Langston Enterprises." The woman extended a manicured hand which Tessa reluctantly shook. I understand you've had some concerns about our Wilson property development. Tessa's eyes narrowed. Rhett sent you? Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. No, Ms. Granger. In fact, Mr. Langston doesn't know I'm here. This is a courtesy visit. From the company. Courtesy? Tessa repeated. We understand your farm is adjacent to our new development, Victoria said smoothly. And while we're fully within our legal rights to proceed with our plans, we're willing to discuss accommodations. Tessa crossed her arms. What kind of accommodations? Victoria surveyed the modest farm with calculating eyes. You're running a small operation here. Must be difficult to stay afloat in today's economy. We manage, Tessa said stiffly. Of course, Victoria's smile was thin. But imagine if you didn't have to just manage. Langston Enterprises would be willing to purchase your property at a very generous price, well above market value. Tessa felt her anger rising. My farm isn't for sale. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Everyone has a price, Ms. Granger. Think about it. You could start fresh somewhere else, maybe even closer to the city. No more struggling to make ends meet. This land has been in my family for generations, Tessa said firmly. I'm not interested. I see. Victoria's tone cooled. Well, should you reconsider, here's my card. She placed a business card on top of Tessa's work basket. Our offer won't stay open indefinitely. Once construction begins next month, property values in this area will fluctuate. The threat was thinly veiled. Tessa stood her ground. Is that all, Miss Pierce? For now. Victoria turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Miss Granger, I'd advise you not to waste any more of Mr. Langston's time. He has important responsibilities that don't include dalliances with local farmers. Tessa's face burned, but she refused to give Victoria the satisfaction of a response. She watched in silence as the woman returned to her car and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in her wake. Once she was alone, Tessa picked up Victoria's card and tore it into tiny pieces, letting the fragments scatter in the breeze. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Rhett. This time she read it. Please talk to me. I had no idea about the Wilson property. I'm trying to fix this. Tessa hesitated, then typed back, Your VP just offered to buy my farm. Was that your idea of fixing things? The response came almost immediately. What VP? Tessa, I swear I didn't send anyone. Before she could reply, another text came through. I'm coming over. Please let me explain. Tessa stared at the phone, uncertain. Part of her wanted to believe Rhett had nothing to do with Victoria's visit, but another part wondered if this was all an elaborate game, good cop, bad cop, designed to pressure her into selling. 20 minutes later, Rhett's truck came barreling up the driveway. He jumped out, leaving Boone inside, and strode toward her with a thunderous expression. Who came to see you? He demanded. Victoria Pierce, Tessa replied. Executive Vice President, apparently. Rhett's face darkened further. Pierce, she's head of our resort division. What did she say to you? She offered to buy my farm, said I should take the money and leave before construction starts and my property values drop. Tessa studied his reaction. She also implied I was wasting your time. I'm going to fire her, Rhett said, his voice low and angry. Can you? Tessa challenged. Or is she just doing exactly what your board wants? Rhett ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Tessa, I had no idea she was coming here. I've been in meetings all morning trying to find a way to change the development plans. And can you? Tessa asked, allowing a sliver of hope to creep into her voice. Rhett's hesitation told her everything. It's complicated, he admitted. The contracts are signed. There are investors' timelines, so nothing changes, Tessa said flatly. Your company builds its resort, my farm suffers, and we all move on. I'm not giving up, Rhett insisted. I'm looking at alternatives, scaling back the development, creating buffer zones, maybe even incorporating your farm into the overall plan somehow. Incorporating my farm? Tessa echoed incredulously. What does that mean? Turning it into some tourist attraction where city people can pet a goat for $20? That's not what I meant, Rhett said, frustration evident in his voice. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. There is no solution that works for everyone. Rhett, either your resort gets built and changes everything about this area or it doesn't. Tessa's voice softened slightly. I believe you didn't know about the land purchase. I even believe you're trying to help now. But the fact remains, your company and my farm want the same thing. This land, and only one of us can have it. Rhett stepped closer, his expression earnest. What if we fight this together? I have influence at the company. If I take a public stand against the development, they'd replace you, Tessa finished for him. You said it yourself, you're the president, not the CEO. The board could vote you out if you oppose this project. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing, Rhett said quietly. Tessa stared at him. What? I told you before, I never wanted to run the corporate side of things. My father pushed me into it. Rhett's eyes held hers. Maybe this is my chance to choose a different path. You'd give up your family's company? For what? Tessa asked, her heart racing. For something real, Rhett answered simply. For a chance. To be the person I want to be, not who everyone expects me to be. Tessa wanted to believe him. The sincerity in his eyes, the determination in his voice, it all seemed genuine. But she'd been hurt before, and the stakes were too high. Words are easy, Rhett, she said. It's actions that matter. Then let me act, he replied, taking her hand. Give me a chance to prove what I'm saying. Come to the charity gala at my house this weekend. I'll announce some changes publicly, ones that will protect your farm. And if your board overrules you? Then at least we tried, Rhett said. Together. As Boone barked impatiently from the truck, Tessa found herself at a crossroads. Could she trust Rhett Langston to fight for her farm? Or was she setting herself up for heartbreak and disappointment? Looking into his eyes, she made her decision. Okay, I'll come to your gala. Rhett's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Thank you, he said, squeezing her hand. You won't regret it. But as he drove away, Tessa wondered if she already did. The battle ahead would test not just their relationship, but everything they both believed about themselves and what they valued most, and neither of them could predict how it would end. Tessa stared at her reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The navy blue dress she had borrowed from her friend Linda hugged her figure in a way her usual work clothes never did. Her normally practical braid had been replaced by soft waves that framed her face. This is ridiculous, she muttered, reaching for her familiar work boots before stopping herself. Linda had loaned her heels too, insisting they were necessary. For the gala. Tessa's stomach churned with nerves. In just a few hours she would be walking into the Langston mansion, facing a room full of wealthy strangers, and watching Rhett potentially sacrifice his family legacy, all for her farm. The pressure felt overwhelming. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rhett. Car will pick you up at 7, can't wait to see you. Tessa took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. The car that arrived was not the simple town car she had expected, but a sleek black limousine. The driver, a polite older man in a uniform, held the door open for her. Miss Granger, he said with a slight nod. Mr. Langston sends his apologies. He wanted to pick you up himself, but he was detained by last-minute preparations. The drive to the Langston estate took nearly 40 minutes, winding through countryside that gradually gave way to more manicured properties. When they finally passed through an ornate iron gate and up a tree-lined drive, Tessa's breath caught. The Langston mansion was even more impressive than she had imagined, a sprawling stone house with columns, terraces, and perfectly landscaped gardens. Dozens of expensive cars lined the circular driveway, and guests in formal attire were making their way inside. This is where Rhett lives, Tessa whispered to herself. The gap between their worlds had never felt wider. As the driver helped her from the car, Tessa spotted a familiar golden shape bounding down the steps. Boone raced toward her, tail wagging ecstatically, wearing what appeared to be a bow tie collar. For the occasion. At least one friendly face, Tessa said, kneeling to greet the dog despite her fancy dress. Boone licked her cheek, seeming as happy to see her as ever. He's been watching the driveway for an hour, said Rhett's voice behind her. Tessa stood and turned to find Rhett looking devastatingly handsome in a tuxedo. His eyes widened as he took in her appearance. Tessa, he said softly, you look beautiful. I feel like an imposter, she admitted, smoothing her borrowed dress nervously. Rhett shook his head. You're the most real person here. He offered his arm. Shall we? With Boone trotting beside them, They climbed the steps to the mansion. Inside, the entrance hall was filled with people in expensive clothes, sipping champagne, and engaged in animated conversation. A few curious glances turned their way as Rhett guided her through the crowd. "Everyone's staring," Tessa whispered. "Because you're with me," Rhett said with a smile, "and because you outshine everyone else here." Tessa was about to reply when a sharp voice cut through the ambient noise. "Rhett, darling, there you are." A tall, elegant woman in her 60s approached, dripping in diamonds. Her keen eyes assessed Tessa with undisguised curiosity. "Aunt Eleanor," Rhett said, kissing the woman's cheek. "May I introduce Tessa Granger? Tessa, this is my father's sister, Eleanor Langston." "Ms. Granger," Eleanor said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "How unexpected. Rhett rarely brings guests to these functions." "It's nice to meet you," Tessa replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Tessa owns Willow Bend Farm," Rhett explained. "The lavender farm near the Wilson property." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "Ah, I see. Business, then." She patted Rhett's arm. "The board members are looking for you, dear. Something about your announcement tonight." "I'll find them soon," Rhett promised, his expression revealing nothing. As Eleanor moved away, Tessa turned to Rhett. "Your aunt doesn't approve of me." "My aunt doesn't approve of anyone who isn't from our social circle," Rhett replied. "Don't let it bother you." Throughout the next hour, Rhett introduced Tessa to a blur of faces: business associates, family friends, ranch, hands who had worked for the Langstons for generations. Some were warm and welcoming, others barely concealed their surprise at her presence. Victoria Pierce was there too, her smile freezing when she spotted Tessa on Rhett's arm. She made a beeline for them, her sequined gown catching the light. "Mr. Langston," she said smoothly, "the board is quite eager to discuss tonight's agenda with you in private." Her eyes flickered to Tessa with barely concealed disdain. "Of course," Rhett said. He squeezed Tessa's hand. "I'll be right back." As he walked away with Victoria, Tessa felt suddenly adrift in the sea of strangers. She retreated to a quiet corner, where Boone found her and sat by her feet, his presence comforting. "He doesn't belong with someone like you, you know." Tessa looked up to find Eleanor Langston watching her, a crystal glass of amber liquid in her hand. "Excuse me?" Tessa said. Eleanor sat in the chair beside her. "My nephew. He has responsibilities, a legacy to uphold. This company was my brother's life's work." She studied Tessa with shrewd eyes. "What exactly are your intentions with him?" "I don't have intentions," Tessa replied firmly. "We care about each other." "How quaint," Eleanor smiled thinly. "And when he tells you he's cancelling the Wilson project tonight, as I hear he plans to do, that has nothing to do with your affection for each other?" Tessa felt her cheeks flush. "If Rhett opposes the project, it's because he believes it's wrong." "He believes what you've convinced him to believe," Eleanor countered. "My nephew has always been the soft one, idealistic like his mother." She leaned closer. "Do you know what will happen if he publicly opposes this development? The board will remove him. The project will proceed anyway. And the Langston name, our family's legacy, will be tarnished." "Maybe some legacies need to change," Tessa said quietly. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You think you know what's best for him after what? A few weeks? I've known Rhett his entire life. This company is in his blood." "Maybe that's the problem," Tessa responded. "Everyone telling him who he is instead of letting him decide for himself." Before Eleanor could reply, the sound of a microphone being tapped echoed through the room. Rhett was standing on a small dais at the far end of the hall, his expression serious. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice strong. "Thank you for coming tonight. Before we proceed with the fundraising portion of our evening, I have an important announcement regarding Langston Enterprises." The room fell silent. Tessa's heart raced as she made her way closer to the front, Boone at her heels. "As many of you know, we recently acquired the Wilson property for our newest luxury ranch resort," Rhett continued. "What you may not know is that this development, as currently planned, would significantly impact the surrounding agricultural community, particularly Willow Bend Farm, a small but vital part of our local heritage." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tessa saw Victoria, Pierce's face darken with anger. After careful consideration, Rhett said, his eyes finding Tessa in the crowd, I am proposing a complete redesign of the project, one that preserves the natural landscape, reduces our footprint, and establishes a permanent agricultural buffer zone to protect neighboring farms. More whispers, some approving, others clearly shocked. A group of men in suits, the board members, Tessa assumed, were huddled together, their expressions thunderous. Furthermore, Rhett continued, undeterred, I'm announcing a new initiative, the Langston Rural Preservation Fund, which will provide grants to support sustainable farming practices in our community. The first recipient will be Willowbend Farm, whose owner Tessa Granger has shown me what true stewardship of the land looks like. Tessa stood frozen, unable to believe what she was hearing. This wasn't just Rhett saving her farm, it was him, redefining his entire company's approach. Now I understand some may question this direction, Rhett acknowledged, his voice firm. But my father built this company on respect for the land and the people who work it. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. Tonight we begin to reclaim it. Applause broke out, led by the ranch hands and other locals in the crowd. The board members remained stone-faced. As Rhett stepped down from the dais, Victoria Pierce intercepted him, speaking rapidly with barely contained fury. Tessa couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. Victoria pointed at Tessa, her face livid. Rhett's response was loud enough for many to hear. I believe I just did my job, Ms. Pierce. If the board disagrees, they know where to find me. He walked away from the stunned executive, straight to Tessa. Taking her hand, he led her out to the terrace, away from the curious eyes of the guests. Boone followed, taking up a protective position at Tessa's feet. Did you just risk everything for my farm? Tessa asked when they were alone, the night air cool on her skin. No, Rhett said, his eyes serious in the moonlight. I finally stood up for what I believe in. You gave me the courage to do that. Your board looks ready to fire you on the spot, Tessa said, glancing back toward the ballroom where several grim-faced men were now in heated discussion. They might, Rhett admitted. But I realized something these past few weeks. The company my father built wasn't about maximizing profits at all costs. It was about building something that would last, that would honor the land and the people who work it. He took her hands in his. You reminded me of that. Tessa felt tears threatening. I never wanted you to lose your position. Maybe I needed to lose it, Rhett said softly, to find what really matters. As if on cue, Boone sat up and placed his paw on Tessa's knee, his doggy expression serious. See? Rhett smiled. Boone agrees. Tessa laughed through her tears. He's a very wise dog. The wisest, Rhett agreed. He found you, after all. The next month passed in a whirlwind. True to Tessa's prediction, the board called an emergency meeting after the gala, but instead of firing Rhett, they were surprised when several major investors expressed support for his new vision. The revised development plan would take longer to build, but promised to become a showcase for sustainable luxury tourism. Victoria Pierce resigned, unwilling to adapt to the new direction. Eleanor Langston, surprisingly, became one of Rhett's strongest advocates, telling anyone who would listen that her nephew had finally shown he had his father's backbone. The redesigned resort would occupy only a third of the Wilson property. The rest would become a nature preserve, with walking trails connecting to Willowbend Farm, where visitors could learn about lavender cultivation and sustainable farming, for a modest fee, of course. One evening, as autumn painted the countryside in warm hues, Rhett and Tessa sat on her porch swing, watching Boone chase fireflies in the yard. The first guests will arrive at the resort next spring, Rhett said, his arm around her shoulders. Are you ready to be a tourist attraction? Tessa laughed. As long as they buy my cheese and lavender products, I can handle a few city folks. Asking silly questions, Rhett's expression grew serious. There's something I wanted to ask you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Tessa's breath caught. Rhett, it's not a ring, he said quickly. Not yet anyway, we'll get there when we're ready. He opened the box to reveal a dog collar, engraved with the words, Home is wherever you are. I had this made for Boone, Rhett explained. But the message is for you too. These past months have shown me what home really feels like. It's not a mansion filled with things. It's wherever I feel most myself, and that's with you." Tessa's eyes filled with tears. "That's the sweetest thing anyone's ever said to me." Rhett took her hand. "I have one more piece of news. I bought a small cabin on the east side of your property. Just 2 acres, nothing fancy. I thought, maybe I could live there, be closer to you, to this life." "You'd leave your mansion to live in a cabin?" Tessa asked, astonished. "The mansion was never me," Rhett said simply. "My father wanted it, not me. The cabin feels right, close enough to be with you every day, but giving you the space you need." Tessa touched his face gently. "What about the company?" "I'm still the president," Rhett said with a smile. "But I've delegated a lot of the corporate work. My focus now is on sustainable ranching practices and the preservation fund. Work I can do from here with you." He looked out at the lavender fields, golden in the sunset. "If you'll have me." Instead of answering, Tessa leaned forward and kissed him, putting all her feelings into the gesture. Boone barked happily, running circles around the porch, as if celebrating with them. When they finally broke apart, Tessa rested her forehead against Rhett's. "I guess your runaway dog knew what he was doing all along." "Boone's always been the smartest of us," Rhett agreed, pulling her close. As night fell, over Willowbend Farm, the 3 of them sat together on the porch. A woman who had fought to preserve her family's legacy, a man who had found the courage to redefine his, and the faithful dog who had somehow known they belonged together before they did. And in that quiet moment, with fireflies dancing in the fields and stars emerging overhead, they were exactly where they were meant to be. Home, 3 months later, Tessa adjusted her new blue scarf, a gift from Rhett, as she took her seat at the boardroom table. The Langston Enterprises headquarters was intimidating with its glass and steel architecture, but she refused to let it show. "Ready for your first advisory board meeting?" Rhett asked, looking professional yet relaxed in a suit without a tie. "As ready as I'll ever be," Tessa replied, "though I still think it's strange to split my time between the farm and this." She gestured at the sleek boardroom. "The Sustainable Agriculture Advisory Board needs your expertise," Rhett reminded her, "and it's only 1 week a month." Tessa nodded, still uncertain. The offer had come as a surprise, a chance to help shape Langston Enterprises' approach to working with small farms across the region. It meant leaving Willowbend for a few days each month, something she'd never imagined doing. "What if I can't balance both?" she asked quietly. "The farm is still my priority." Rhett took her hand under the table. "Then we adjust. Nothing is set in stone." The other board members began filing in, a mixture of agricultural experts, environmentalists, and business leaders. Tessa straightened her shoulders, ready to make her voice heard. Later that evening, as they drove back to Willowbend, Tessa felt a strange sense of fulfillment. Her ideas had been not just heard but embraced. She was no longer just fighting for her own farm, but helping many others like it. "You were amazing today," Rhett said as they pulled into the driveway where Boone waited, tail wagging frantically. "It felt good," Tessa admitted. "Different, but good." As she stepped out of the car, Tessa looked at her farm, the lavender fields, the goat pen, the small farmhouse with its porch light welcoming her home. Then she glanced at Rhett's cabin, visible through the trees, smoke curling from its chimney. 2 different worlds, somehow finding a way to coexist. Boone raced to greet them, his collar catching the light of the setting sun. "Home is wherever you are," it read, a simple truth that had changed all their lives. Tessa knew that challenges lay ahead. Balancing the farm with her new role wouldn't be easy, but as Rhett slipped his arm around her waist and Boone pressed against her legs, she realized that home wasn't just a place. It was the love they'd found with each other, and that was worth fighting for every single day. The end.